first of the ACC to Miami. The Hurricanes with a win against top 20 North Carolina State. Charleston Rambo gets some honors, including the one that Craig is very much a part of, as is his mother and I as well, and that's the Earl Campbell Tyler Rose Award for his performance in that game. Kobe Bryce of the South Florida Sun Sentinel joins us, covers the Hurricanes. Kobe, how big was that? That program needed a lift. How big was that win?
It was a big one. It was absolutely a big one. I think they had they had lost the last 6 games to FBS programs heading into that NC State win. So that was much needed, just to both end that streak, but also, get some positivity into the locker room after having such a tough start to the year.
Kobe, Manny Diaz is in, all kind of hot water with his job and everything. Do you think that he needs to win the majority of the rest of them going out, or are they still maybe a year away from looking at that because he hasn't been there very long?
No, he hasn't. This is the middle of his 3rd year. But to directly answer your question, I do think he needs to win the majority of the games for the rest of the 2021 season. The athletic director here, Blake James, he spoke with media, certain media members before the NC State game, and he basically laid it out saying that, Manny knows this, but we need to win more games. The football team needs to win more games. And, kind of from my end, just looking at it, the athletic director said something like that, knowing, Manny is on the hot seat. There was supposed to be, another step taken this year, but that step was not taken. And, maybe even if they don't get the success they have, maybe Manny is allowed to come back. Maybe they do bring him back and he's on that seat's even hotter. He's on a shorter lease and going into next year. But I do think how this season finishes will ultimately determine whether Manny does come back for 2022 or not.
Kobe, how much does the fact that the ACC is so down this year, Clemson obviously not in the typical mix, how much does that add to maybe frustration surrounding the Hurricanes' performance thus far, a missed opportunity of sorts, if you will?
I mean, I would imagine it's a significant amount. I mean, if you just focus on the Coastal Division alone, I mean, the Coastal Division's always up for grabs no matter what year it is. Right now Pittsburgh is on top, but 2 years ago, Virginia was on top, and and that's saying that UNC and Miami were supposed to be the 2 teams, on top. And then, you look at ACC as a whole, who would have thought Wake Forest would be the team, the only, I guess, the highest ranked team in the entire conference. Obviously, you mentioned Clemson, but they still find a way to beat NC State. So, yeah, it adds to the frustration because this feels like a year in which any team could truly grab it, and Miami, up to this point, hasn't shown that they're going to be the team who will take the ACC crown this year.
How much the injury to De'Aaron King, how much has that been like the death nail in a lot of ways?
It doesn't help matters at all. I mean, De'Aaron, he, at least in my view, he covered up so many holes that this team had last year, and even a few of them to start the year. But even when he was at quarterback, the team struggled in certain areas. The holes that he was able to cover last year, he wasn't able to cover in the same way. He had a slow start to the year. So the team, in a way, almost was a little bit more exposed. Their flaws were exposed, even when he was on the field. And it took them a minute, and I still think it's taking them a little minute to, recover from losing, let's be honest, their best player over the last, season and a half. However, they seem to be finding their footing. They seem to be finding a way, not just by, with Tyler Van Dyke's play, but by figuring out which guys do need to be playing and which guys maybe should not be having a prominent role on this team.
Kobe, how much of Miami's problems are not really Manny Diaz at all? It's the fact that they're kind of living off of their past name. They really could use a stadium on campus, a president, athletic director, and a head coach, all with one clear vision and mission, which they haven't had, regardless of who the head football coach is, for quite some time. I mean, right now they're playing in an NFL stadium that they can't possibly hope to fill or have a real home field advantage in, and that's not good for anybody, regardless, not if you were one of the best teams of the 80s, 90s, and early aughts.
Yeah, no, I mean, it doesn't help matters at all that, when people think of Miami, people think of the glory years. But, those glory years have not been here, well over 20 years. So it doesn't help matters that you have all these outside factors, the external factors, affecting the team, affecting how the team is viewed. And, that synergy, that alignment, that does matter. And it matters in terms of getting the program back to where it needs to be. But I'm not saying that Manny's blameless in all of this, or Manny and the coaching staff isn't blamed for all of this, because too often this year, we've seen, errors or slow starts that you can't attribute directly to coaching, to not being, seemingly not being as prepared as it could be. So while there are things, outside of Manning that's certainly affecting the program at large, there are things that I feel like, and I think he would agree with, him as the coaching staff, but also the players on the team could do better, even with all the other outside factors going against them.
Well, Kobe, since we keep going back to the coaching thing, I might as well ask you now, who are some names that, and I want to ask you about something else as well in regards to the team, but who are some names that you would, identify as some top ones being discussed amongst the fans, amongst the media, at least when it comes to a potential opening sooner rather than later?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's still the question about whether this is Manning's last year, if Manning will come back. But a big name that, whether it's media, fans, et cetera, that the name that he's getting floated around here is Mario Cristobal. A native down here, grew up down here, played down here, coached down here for a little bit. And obviously, you have the success he's had at Oregon with recruiting and just also the actual program itself and how they perform. That's been a name that fans down here are just, it's the name. He's the guy that fans are really coveting. Obviously, there's so many hoops and so much would have to happen for that to even come to fruition. But that is the name that, at least down here, people are really looking at.
I'm curious. I'm curious, Kobe, that because when Miami was good and great, they were great. And then you always could look at the sidelines and see why they were great for so long with all the names and personalities. Do they still have those type of players and celebrities showing up on the sideline during home games?
For home games, at least from my view, I haven't noticed it as much. Obviously, you do have one of the greatest players in the history of the program, Ed Reed, on staff. You can see him at games, all the time, even away games. But from the celebrity standpoint, at least from my view, I haven't seen it as frequently as maybe possibly the heyday of the program.
So, Miami has been dealt more than a few blows as far as injuries go, and Bubba Bolden, big-time safety, is the latest one. That leaves them pretty inexperienced, right, at the safety spot. And, given who you're looking at coming up here, how much of a concern is the Bubba Bolden injury?
It's a concern, and even with Bubba not playing to the level that, he wanted to, was expected to this year, it's still a concern. You're going to likely have two true freshmen in Cam Kitchens and James Williams starting at safety, going against, a guy who, in Kenny Pickett, who, last time I checked, he had the fourth best odds to win the Heisman Trophy, and he just had a spectacular year, through October. So it is a concern. It's a concern from a communication standpoint, because even when Bubba wasn't playing well, wasn't tackling well, he was still able to communicate and get guys to the position they needed to be in. So it absolutely is a concern. That being said, James and Cam have impressed, at a level that even coming into the year, the most optimistic fan or analyst may not have expected, immediately at least. So I don't question so much their ability to, do their jobs. It's just, even if they do their jobs well, this is still a guy who's just balling out throughout the year. So how much impact will it have?
Yeah, it's a place with so much amazing history, but there's a lot of those around the country. You see what Texas is going through, what Nebraska is going through, what Tennessee is going through, what Miami is going through, what Florida State is going through. It's amazing, some of the elite names the last 30, 40 years, and they have struggled a lot, most of them, at least for the last 5 or 6 years, if not longer. Thank you, Kobe. Appreciate your time.
Appreciate having me on. Thank you. Kobe
Price of the South Florida Sun-Sentinel covers the Miami Hurricanes. We appreciate his time. Go ahead.
No, yeah, it's just kind of a shame that, for Miami and certain other schools, it's just going to all be about their coaches because of the uncertainty there. But, that's a big game against Pitt. They have a tough test with Kenny Pickett, man. He is just throwing it all over. You got two freshman safeties now, and like you said, they've done well, but still that's got to be highly concerning. And just even if you had Bubba Bolden, you had everybody. Playing Pickett and the way the Panthers are rolling right now, it's going to be tough. So, yeah, they're obviously not going to be favorites in this game, so there's another loss. How much weight does that add to the whole Manny Diaz and future there in Miami? Do they have any indication that Mario Cristobal would be interested? Because if they did, that would make this whole process go along a lot quicker. If he's not, then that complicates things a bit. But
if you're Mario Cristobal and you can take a USC or LSU job, if that's opened up for you,
unless you want Miami, though,
unless you really wanted Miami, and if I'm Mario Cristobal and taking Miami, I'm telling them, look, I'm taking this being, what Art Briles did here and say, you're going to build a stadium on campus. You're going to do these things for me, and we're going to have synergy, from the top to the bottom between the president, AD, and me, because I'm not stepping into this pretending it's 1991 anymore, because it's not. And they've got to get back to that, because it's hard. Usually even the Orange Bowl, which was in a terrible neighborhood in Miami, but if you brought a recruit into the Orange Bowl when they were playing West Virginia or Nebraska or Florida State or whoever they did back in the day where they're independent in the Big East or wherever they were, man, that place rocked. It rocked. It was electric. And then you move into the Dolphin Stadium, which has had 11 names, since they moved there. But you move in there and, it's not the same.
When we come back, Texas and Baylor coming up on Saturday. Kirk Bohls, Austin American Statesman, trying to. What did Josh Thompson say, and has that thing really matter? I've seen some promo videos or hype videos from Baylor people that have put those up with what he said about the Baylor fan base. But we'll see exactly what was said. Kirk Bohls next on Sikkim 365 Radio, 365 Sports.